Excellent. That was such a fun video, and we're going to return to some of those themes a little bit later, Satya. But I want to start with something that's a little bit more in tune with your own personal personality, and that is your love of cricket. And I actually brought something for you. You know, one of the anecdotes that Satya tells in the book, Hit Refresh, is that when he's on a conference call, and so I want to hand this to you. When he's on a conference call, he actually likes to hold a kookaburra cricket ball. So I went literally to the ends of the earth to find this thing. They're not easy to find. Tell us about your love of cricket, what it means to you, and how it influences your life as a person and a leader.
First of all, thank you so much. And this is probably, the one thing that people have found out because of the book is I love cricket. And so I've got a lot of kookaburra balls now. But I really appreciate it. Growing up in India, I would say for South Asians, this very English game has become more than a religion. And how it happened is just is one of those artifacts of history. And for me, when I look back, I think it's true in most team sports. In fact, the other day I had the great fortune of going and seeing the Seahawks train. And yes. Pete was sort of explaining how he even sets up the training session. And it brought back the memories because some of the coaches I played under and the captains I played under in cricket, I think these team sports grab you and teach you so many lessons. In my case, in the dusty fields of the Deccan Plateau, in fact, that is the place where I must have played a lot of cricket. And then I went back recently. And so I write about the lessons, whether it's about how to compete, how to, in some sense, one of the incidents I recount is a captain I played under. I was a bowler and I was bowling trash that day. And so this guy replaces me and takes a wicket, gets us a breakthrough, and then gives the ball back. And that incident has sort of perhaps had a lot of influence because why did he do it? He could have just sort of broken all my confidence, thrown me out of the team. But for some reason, he decided that, you know what, I'm going to give this ball back because I went on to take more wickets and had a decent season. That ability, that sensibility of what leaders do to bring teams along to do their best work, you can learn from team sport.
I know that it also teaches endurance. I believe one of the types of cricket that you like to watch and perhaps play is test cricket. Can you explain for this American audience what test cricket is?
Yeah, one of my most, there's a huge debate going on in the cricket community because we now have a version of cricket which is like baseball, which I know Americans think is long, but for us that's the shortest form of cricket. And whereas I love the 5-day test cricket. It's like a Russian novel. It's got plots and subplots, and it's just beautiful. And so the debate really is, how does that continue in its popularity? But nevertheless, I'm a big fan, and I was very clear even with ESPN Cricinfo. If test cricket goes away, they'll lose one fan at least.
Yeah, that's right. So you actually got to sit down with ESPN Cricinfo. What was that like? Because I know that was sort of a highlight for you of the tour.
It was really fun. I'd never been to Lord's in London, which is the home of cricket, as they like to call it. I'd been past it, but I'd watched it on telly a lot of times, but I'd never been in there. So to go to this hallowed ground, and then, and it's one of those other fascinating things that happens, I guess, when people go to places where you've read everything about it. And cricket has a lot of literature, by the way, around it. And I've read everything. And so this is one of those places that you walk in after having read about everything for a lifetime, and then you see the place, and it was just fun. And then to have an interview, as Frank Shaw, who works with me, was telling me, I don't know who was excited, whether the interviewer or I was, and I was really excited about that.
That's great. That's great. All right, let's take a look at this picture. February 4th, 2014, you were named the third CEO in Microsoft's history. You're here with Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer, the prior two. What was going through your mind at this point, and what do you wish you could go back and tell that guy in the middle right now about what he was about to face?
I, Todd, am a consummate insider. I grew up in the company that Bill and Steve built. Everything that I've learned, everything about me has been shaped by the company I worked for, which is Microsoft, for now 25 years, and obviously something that wouldn't have happened but for one of the greatest partnerships in business history, which is the partnership of Bill and Steve. And as I distinctly remember that day and leading up to that day, because it was not really long before that day I even knew that I was going to be CEO. The thing that I was seeking the most, and in particular based on all of the people around me that you see even in that photograph, is asking that existential question and being able to answer it for myself, which is, why do we as a company exist? You could say, what sort of a silly sort of way to start, but I do believe that. I do believe companies exist for a reason. There needs to be a sense of purpose. If there's going to be long-term success, you can't be bound by one brand, one product, one technology wave. It's got to go beyond that, right? Because anything that you started with is not going to last forever. But what is that core sense of purpose that can really help drive? And then, of course, what's the culture that will then help you reinforce that sense of purpose with every changing technology wave? So those were the things that, now I see it even 3.5, and in fact, this entire book came about not as some kind of we've reached any destination. If anything, it's reflections of a sitting CEO going through that process, that hard process of transformation, which, by the way, I posit is a continuous process. You'll never, ever reach your destination. How do you keep hitting refresh and being smart about it? That's what I would sort of say. I was pretty naive even 3.5 years ago about all of what I at least now know a bit of. And all I know is I need to learn a lot more.
Yeah. Looking at this, it strikes me that Bill and Paul and then Bill and Steve had each other. There was a partnership. There were two partnerships that resulted in this company, really. You don't have a singular partner. You have what you call in the book a legion of superheroes, right. the SLT, as the Microsoft insiders would call it. How has that changed your leadership of the company, the way the company is run, and ultimately the culture of Microsoft?
In fact, Steve was the one who switched me on to this even, which is he had once reflected when he was CEO about how even in his tenure and his and Bill's tenure, as you rightfully said, it was Paul and Bill and then Bill and Steve, they built the company. Many management teams came and went, but they were constant. And so they could provide that continuity in their own way. And they realized that when the next CEO is going to be in place, the way that CEO will need to operate is going to be very different. And also the business, especially when I was talking to Paul recently, is when it struck me, right? How different the company is than the company that Paul worked at in terms of its scope, its size, its complexity, its operation. So the thing that Steve was in fact trying to even do in his own tenure at Microsoft was to build more of a leadership team. For me, of course, it's an absolute necessity. There is no way I could operate with the context and the depth. Steve could do pretty much anybody's job better than anybody. He had such immense intellectual horsepower. I clearly don't. And the thing that I wanted to make sure is bring the team and also have that ownership for this is our company. And that's something that I've always felt, which is, and this is not just for the SLT, I want people inside the company to feel it's their company so that they can use it as a platform to realize their own mission and their own personal philosophy. And that's sort of what I believe applies to the leadership team as well.
You said earlier that you were the consummate insider, and you've said in the past that gave you the credibility internally to make change. You were not an outside person coming in to make change. Now, after 3.5 years, the stock price has doubled. I recognize you don't have direct control over the stock price, but in fact, that is some external credibility that you've gained through your leadership of this company. What do you plan to do with that external credibility? Could you take even bigger bets now on Microsoft's future, given that kind of rope that you got on Wall Street?
I think you're absolutely right. Tech businesses in particular are about that constant need to renew itself by taking big bets, because in some sense we've got this attribute that things all look like failures until they're not. They're pretty binary transitions because of these network effects in technology. So you got to be able to see things that are changing long before their conventional wisdom, take bets, and then go after them in a strong way. So to your point, but at the same time, the market is going to hold you accountable. They're going to pass judgment on your judgment. In some sense, it's a rear-view mirror, because they're trying to sort of make sure that you're able to walk the walk of producing results, and then they will give you permission. So you got to get, as I describe it, to use a cricketing metaphor, a batting average that is good. And I think that in Microsoft, in our 43rd year, think about it this way, Todd. I mean, here we are, 43 years after inception, fighting it out with a whole set of new characters, not the ones that we competed with 43 years ago, let alone 10 years ago. That, I think, shows that we have that capability, the capability to renew ourselves. We'll hit some, we'll miss some, but we'll keep at it. But I'm very, very excited about what we're doing in mixed reality, what we're doing in AI, what we're going to do even in some really longer lead things like quantum. And by the way, all these efforts didn't get started 3.5 years ago. It's really Bill who started MSR. It's Steve who started our cloud push. And so these are the folks who saw it long before, it was conventional wisdom that these are the things that can be successful. And that, I think, is key. And you're right. I mean, as an insider, I've been through that journey. But at the same time, I was also very grounded on the things that needed changing.
So along those lines, one of the things that struck me about the book, and it's fun to read a book like this as a reporter who's been covering the company, because you get the inside information on some of the things that you've been doing that we've been reporting on, and you find out what really happened. So apart from the rose petals anecdote, which folks will have to find out about, one of my favorite anecdotes in the book gets directly to this, and that is how you and Amy Hood decided to reorient Wall Street. You said, we're not going to focus as much on where we are in smartphones. We are going to set a target, $20 billion in cloud revenue. And it was an interesting mind exercise that you went through to try and get Wall Street to look elsewhere. Is that a good approach? Would you give that advice to other CEOs in the audience to set goals like that and make them externally? Because it's risky.
I mean, it's clearly, one of the things, it's not about looking elsewhere, but one of the key things that we felt that we needed to make clear, both quite frankly, internally and externally, is what's the trend that we are really capitalizing on, and how are we winning in that space? Because that, I think, was going to be very important for the confidence internally and externally. The reality was, most people even today sort of view our cloud sometimes narrowly by talking about it as, hey, here is your competition with AWS. That's one space. But if you look at even our cloud, we have SaaS applications with Office 365. We have business applications with Dynamics 365. We have Azure. We are a believer in distributed infrastructure, so it's not just Azure. Azure has an edge with Azure Stack. So we wanted to make sure that it was clear, both internally and externally, that we will have a big business here. But most importantly, we will innovate. We'll serve our customers. And so you're right, you have to take that risk. And it's our ability to walk that walk, quarter after quarter, that's really helped the street, in some sense, say, well, this is a management team, this is a company that can, in fact, follow through, and we'll never be done. I'll have another quarterly call in a few weeks, and I have to show up with Amy and show our progress, and that's how it is, and that's what's going to give us permission to keep doing the AI work, the quantum work, the mixed reality work. But I think that's what all companies have to do, which is you've got to be able to perform, but you've got to also accrue power for the future. Because your revenue, one of the major cultural changes we made even in the company was not to fall in love with essentially lagging indicators of success, but really fall in love with leading indicators of success, which is, usage, customer satisfaction, come long before revenue and profit. And we needed to sort of make sure we are really tracking that, not just what we deliver per quarter.
I want to talk about the future of technology, and that portion of the conversation actually starts in an unexpected place here with your son, Zane. He was born with cerebral palsy, and you write in detail, very candidly, about your early struggles with this. But it has totally changed your outlook on the world, on technology, on your life. Walk us through that, if you would.
Yeah, I mean, Zane was born when I was 29 years old, and his birth, perhaps more than anything else, has shaped a lot of who I am, perhaps today. Especially, that was probably one of the more harder parts of writing even the book, to go back and reflect on it in more concrete terms as to what he has taught me. As a 29-year-old, with both my wife and me, we were the only children of our parents. And so when Zane was about to be born, it was all exciting in the house, and we were looking forward to him and the nursery being ready, and whether Anu would get back to her work, or how quickly can she get back to her work as an architect, which she had just started. But of course, that night when he was born, everything changed. He was born because of in utero asphyxiation with severe brain damage, which has led subsequently to cerebral palsy. And quite frankly, Todd, I struggled with it. I struggled for it for perhaps multiple years, because none of the well laid out plans of mine as sort of a mid-level or even an entry-level engineer at Microsoft were all sort of out of the window. I needed to sort of recalibrate, and I, for a long time, felt like, why has this happened to us and me? And then it's only by watching my wife, who even right after recovering from her C-section was driving Zane up and down the bridges here to get him to therapies and give him the best shot. And that's what perhaps really got me out of my stupor and said, okay, what do I as a father have to do? And over the years, we've been blessed in this community, whether it's the Children's Hospital, it's the physical therapists, the occupational therapists, the speech therapists, the community that we have now around us, and the connections, and the role of technology. Zane, has gone through many, sort of hardships of, medical surgeries and what have you. And there was even one incident I remember. One day I was sitting waiting for him to come out of his surgery room, and then all of the equipment around me, a lot of that was Windows. And I was saying, hey, it does all better work. It just sort of gave me the feeling of, or the understanding of the responsibility even of a platform company, a technology company. Because that's one of the things that's very unique about Microsoft, which is we are in every power grid, we are in every hospital, we are in every critical part of our society and our economy. And we've got to take that responsibility very, very seriously.
How has it shaped your views on the accessibility of technology and making sure that everyone can access the power of innovation?
And to me, my personal life, of course, has been a great influence on how I think about the importance of accessibility. But one of the things that I am seeing inside of Microsoft is this universal design and accessibility as a real driver of true innovation. And I'll give you a couple of things. One of the apps that we launched recently, which uses the cutting-edge AI in our cloud around computer vision, and gives anybody with visual impairment the capability to see. In fact, Angela Mills, who's a coworker of mine, whom I had worked with very early on as part of my Microsoft career, was telling me this story of how she now can go into our own cafeteria at Microsoft, order with confidence because she can see the food, read the ingredients, read the menu. She can walk into conference rooms. We have Braille readers and what have you, but the issue is she wants to walk into the conference room knowing that that's the right one, not barge into something that's not the one that she needs to. And she can do that now with confidence. So she is able to fully participate. She's empowered because of AI and we will fully participate.
This is an app called Seeing AI.
Seeing
it's for
AI.
iOS and Android. You can hold it up to the world. It identifies people. It will tell you the approximate age of somebody. It's kind of like sort of a petri dish for AI technologies. It's really cool.
It's really cool, and in fact, we're going to try and even make it extensible, and there are already some extensibility, like it'll recognize currency if you want to pay. It's awesome. It just, it gives people more empowerment who need it. Similarly, what we did with learning tools. This is again another very passionate group inside of Microsoft who said, we have some amazing technology around reading, which now mixed with AI can change the outcomes for kids with dyslexia. So now in Word and OneNote, you have learning tools so that, kids or anyone with dyslexia can start, reading faster, better, more comprehend text. Steve Gleason came to one of our hackathons, and again, a group of passionate people sort of said, what can we do for an ALS patient who has the ability to move has eye gaze, but all of the other muscles can't be moved, but can they communicate? And so we now have in Windows 10, in fact, in the Fall Creators Update, eye gaze as an input mechanism. So I feel one of the things that's being unlocked is this fundamental recognition that it's not just about accessibility as AT technology. In fact, we historically, even at Microsoft, would think of it as, oh, wow, this is something that you do as assistive technology.
Kind of a niche.
As a niche, as something that you do on top of having built the product. But the reality is, the one thing that is true for all of us is, at some point in our life, we all will need some help with some sense of ours. That's going to be really the universal truth. So we better design products so that it can help everybody. And that's what I think we're trying to invoke. And the beauty of it is it's not some top-down thing, quite frankly. It is much more, if you look at our hackathons, but they don't end with just that 1 week we do. It takes life after that, where product teams are passionate. And we have a long distance to cover. But what Cortana can mean for accessibility, what mixed reality can mean for accessibility, these are exciting frontiers, and I think it's going to make us better AI company, a better devices company, a better everything company by sort of focusing in this area.
Great. So let's talk about the future. You identify 3 trends in the book: mixed reality, quantum computing, and artificial intelligence that are, in your view, going to drive the future. Paint for us, if you will, a picture of that future. What is the world going to be like if these 3 things come to fruition for our grandkids, or perhaps even our grandkids? What are you thinking about now as you're laying the foundation for that future?
One of the hazardous things to do is speculate in technology about the future. But these 3 trends broadly, how they manifest in specific terms, I think will be very path dependent. It'll be dependent on where we start. So here's how I think about it. Take mixed reality. We've been on this journey where we've been creating these mirror worlds, right? Which is, we have been trying to create metaphors that we find in the physical space in a digital world. Desktop being a great example of it. But for the first time, we now have the ability to take what you see and just superimpose in your field of view the digital artifact. So in other words, the analog and digital medium can merge. You can have a complete immersive experience. That's what people call virtual reality. Or people can, in fact, see the two together, and that's what people call augmented reality. Our view is that that's a dial that you get to set. And we're in the early stages of the devices. But ultimately, our dream is that people will have devices which will be like your glasses that you will wear, that you can set dials and be able to sort of really, all computing experiences will be mediated by this new medium. Now, in order to do that, you really need AI. I mean, one of the things that even in the HoloLens today is a chip called HPU, or the holographic processing units. It's one of the first neural processing units, because what it does is it understands spatially everything that is happening and then is able to do the lock of a digital object into real space. That means it solves the computer vision challenge. So I think AI is going to be very much part of even bringing forth these new UI metaphors. In fact, I look at what we're doing with mixed reality as a gaze first, gesture first, and a voice-first interface. Because you're not really trying to do keyboard and mouse or touch, but it's really all about gaze and speech and computer vision. And so that's the real AI capability that we want to build. Now, in AI, I feel one of the challenges we have, and we talked about all of the things around seeing AI or learning tools, but even take Cortana, one of the things that I'm most excited about is AI that helps me with my more scarce commodity, which is time. Every day I send lots of emails, get lots of emails. I make, in fact, commitments in email, which I forget. But Cortana saves me every day because it tells me, oh, you sent mail to Todd saying you'll follow up on Thursday, and Thursday comes and it'll wake up and tell me, hey, have you followed up with Todd? So AI that helps me, in fact, focus, get more out of my time, that's what we're trying to do with something like Cortana. And I think that that's going to be the real currency of our time, which is, I always say, it's not, AI can help you stay distracted by engaging a lot more on in things that take away time. But the more real, purpose we need to solve for is how does AI give you back more time for the things that matter the most to you. And quantum to me is, if you say, well, this is amazing. We're going to have this mixed reality future. We're going to have all this AI. What's the one thing that we need more of? It's computing. In some sense, in spite of all the progress we have made, what is still not solved for, let's talk about all the computational problems that are not solved. We can't yet model that natural enzyme in food production. We can't model the catalyst that can absorb, say, the carbon in the air, or build a superconducting material for lossless power transmission. Those are all computational problems, and if you try to solve it using a classical computer, they'll take all the time from sort of beginning of time to now. And so obviously we don't have that time. And that's where I think these advances in quantum computing are going to be super important. So I think of these three things. They're not all on the same. They're not going to be linearly juxtaposed with each other. But I do believe that these three changes are going to be profound in their impact in our lives and in our work.
All three of these areas are highly competitive. Microsoft is far from the only company pursuing them. You've got two competitors in particular in Google and Apple that have an advantage in that they have their own large base of first-party smartphone hardware users. How much of a disadvantage is it for Microsoft that you don't have that on the smartphone now, and how will you overcome it?
That's it's a great question, and it's absolutely right, which is there are 300 million PCs sold, and there's 1 billion smartphones sold. So therein lies, I guess, the math around the high-volume device. I take inspiration, quite frankly, from our own history and how others approached it. There was a time when the only hub for all things was the PC, and until it was not. And today, of course, the conventional wisdom is, that's it. This is the last device that you will ever need and want and have, and if you don't participate in it this second, there is no way, except the two companies you mentioned were born after, or the rebirth at least of Apple was, came not because of their PC share going up. It was mostly because of what they did with the iPod and the iPhone later. So the question really is for us, how do we meet the reality of today and then invent our own future? And the way I think of that is, first, let's make sure our software and applications are used on iOS and Android. So we want to be first class. After all, most people don't remember this, but Office was there on the Mac before Windows was even a platform. And so this is not new to us, and we want to go and make sure that whether it's LinkedIn, or whether it's Skype, whether it is Office, whether it's Outlook, are used every day, or our games. Minecraft, we want to make sure whether it's gaming or productivity and communications, do our best work on iOS and Android. We also want to look at these changes in form function. What is a mobile device today? How is that going to be shaped? And whether it's what we did with Surface After all, that was a category with 2-in-1. Nobody thought that there would be such a category. We invented it, we popularized it to the point that now we have good competition. That means we've got to keep at it. What's the next form function change? And also, what are these new big changes, like mixed reality, which in fact put everything up in the air, in terms of what's if you can start seeing your computing in front of you, you're probably not going to keep reaching out to your phone as the hub for everything. So I feel we've got to do our best work and take some bets. Some we will hit, some we won't, but we are very, very committed to both making sure that our cloud services are available as great applications on every mobile endpoint, and we invent the next set of devices, the next set of form factors with the next set of natural interfaces.
Have you given up on smartphone hardware?
The thing that we absolutely do not have the share to have a smartphone hardware that's a real consumer choice. That's, I think, the reality of it. I think there's a lot of press, I think, this week suddenly around this. But the reality is that we cannot compete as a third ecosystem with with no share position and attract developers. So the thing that we are doing is to make sure that the software is available so that we can service the enterprise customers who really don't care about a lot of the things that a consumer will care about. And it's one operating system for us. So it's not like we have a phone operating system that is separate from the Xbox operating system that's separate from the Windows operating system. It's one platform. And so that's where we are, and what we are now all in on is to say, okay, what are we going to do with Surface? How are we going to push the boundaries of what is a PC even? And all in on mixed reality, all in on gaming, all in on all of our applications on iOS and Android. And that's how we're going to go at it.
You just asked a good question. What are you going to do on Surface?
Well, I'll tell you, we have a lot of exciting things that are happening in Surface.
Is there any kind of form factor that you're most interested in that you have not yet entered?
I mean, I'm definitely not going to talk to you about it on the GreekWire stage before I have the device.
Just you and me and a few of our friends here.
But I think the lesson for us, one of the things that, again, Steve was the one who really taught us this, was you got to build the capability. If you think about even the last 5 years or 7 years, the capability we now have, of being able to build devices. It's not about the device, it's the software plus the device, and the ability to, or even it's not even just the device as a system, it's even the ASICs, like the HPU. The fact that we now have that capability to do end-to-end, as I like to call it, from silicon to cloud, is what now we've got to use to innovate new categories. And clearly, category creation is going to be a big part of what we have to do.
Yesterday, we had two of Amazon's top executives, Tony Reed, the head of Echo and Alexa, and Jeff Wilke, the CEO of Amazon's consumer business. You have a front row seat for a very interesting story in technology, even apart from Microsoft right here in the Seattle region. You've been partnering with Amazon between Cortana and Alexa. What are your observations about Amazon and the growth that they've seen?
I mean, I think Amazon's a very impressive company. What Jeff and his team have done is something that I think I've long admired, and I think there's a lot that we can learn. In fact, the good news, I think, is between Microsoft and Amazon, we have a lot of cross-pollination of talent, and it's, I think, helpful for this region, by the way, which I think was something that Silicon Valley always had, which I think is a good thing for this region. But I mean, when I look at what we're trying to do with even Alexa and Echo in particular, it's very straightforward, which is I want to make sure that at any point in time, value that we can deliver to customers is not artificially held back because the way to reach them is through someone else's platform. I feel like one thing I have learned actually at Microsoft is that, and most people don't think of it that way, but that's the lesson I learned from what we did with Office on the Macintosh to start with. So I thought that was, Cortana is going to be the assistant that helps me with my time, my productivity. That's going to be the unique skill. So there's no reason why I shouldn't have that capability if I'm a user of Echo and Alexa. So that's the partnership we have. We're going to see. These are all about user habits. I'm not a believer in that. There's going to be this one agent. I think each agent is going to have different characteristics, and you should be able to scaffold these agents together. Some of them, after a while of habitual use, will even become automatic. That's what at least both Jeff and I talked about, and that's what we would hope to see.
Will we ever see a Microsoft HQ2, another headquarters somewhere else in North America?
We are very, very happy where we are. In fact, one of the things we're also committed to is what I would say is our development that's happening in many parts of the world and many parts of the United States. We have a thriving Silicon Valley office. We, in fact, just broke ground for a new office there. We have a big office in New York now. We have offices in Boston and Cambridge, obviously in China and in India. And so I am at least in no hurry to talk about any HQ2s. I'm happy with where we are in Redmond.
The Amazon example is a good one because it's emblematic of the approach you've changed, and you write about this in detail in one chapter of the book, with those industry partnerships. Frenemies, you're competing on some fronts and you're cooperating on others. What's the most awkward moment you've had? Has it been Salesforce when they competed or they disputed your LinkedIn acquisition? How have you navigated those?
I think the fundamental approach I always take is, how can we look at things which are so that they're non-zero sum, and recognizing where there is overlap and there is going to be zero sum competitions. But especially in today's day and age, right, which is we are lucky as a company and as a community in tech to be in tech. It's shaping every walk of life, every part of our economy. And I think it'll be really, in some sense, short-sighted to view things inside of our own industry as all zero-sum. And so that's at least an attitude that I come out with, and that's what sort of shapes a lot of our partners. But at the same time, we're going to compete. We compete with Salesforce in business applications head on. In fact, we are the disruptor in that space. I'm so excited about what we're doing with Dynamics and Dynamics 365. It completely changes the business model, the technology, and everything. But at the same time, Salesforce and Office 365 for the users of those two clouds is great integration. And this is something we did in the past as well, whether it was with Oracle or with SAP. And so I want to just bring that maturity. I sort of feel sometimes what is needed is customer obsession. Let's view things through how they view us versus just our own strategery all the time, and then compete.
So I can't even believe we haven't talked about the largest acquisition in Microsoft's history, which closed less than a year ago, LinkedIn. In our pre-event survey, one of the biggest concerns among attendees was privacy. Data is one of the biggest assets that you acquired through LinkedIn. How can you capitalize most on that data while still being respectful of current and future privacy concerns?
Yeah, I think the entire LinkedIn proposition franchise, as you said, is built around trust. Trust about the data of LinkedIn and the value LinkedIn provides to the user. So that's of the paramount importance, and that's why even when there were some concerns about what we would do with it, it's very clear that there is not, we will only do things that the community of LinkedIn gives us permission and adds value to them. So that's not our data. It's the data of the 500 million people who use LinkedIn, who are members of LinkedIn. And that's one of the things that I reinforce at Microsoft. We don't own data. It's either the user data or it's the organizational data. And we are essentially entrusted to make it secure, make it private, and make sure that they are in control and we are very transparent about all of it. And those principles is what guides everything that we do, whether it's in Office 365 or whether it's on LinkedIn. And if there is value in integration, you have to ask for permission. and get that permission. And I think that's where we're going. And so things like GDPR are essentially going to legislate that. And so therefore, that's the world we should build for.
Should we expect an acceleration of integration between the companies? We've started to see a little bit of it between LinkedIn and Microsoft in terms of the products.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, I feel very, very good about one of my top goals was the re-acceleration of LinkedIn, and we'll talk more about this even in the next quarter, early earnings. But then on top of that, the product integrations. The product integrations we announced between Office 365 and LinkedIn, between Dynamics 365 and LinkedIn, these are all there today, and our customers benefit from it. So we're all, in fact, it's one of those places where we've executed super well on a large acquisition, keeping their ethos, their culture, their value proposition, accelerate that core asset, and then add these product integrations. Not exclusively. There can be others who can also do these product integrations. So that's, I think, been our strategy.
Before we close here, I want to talk about a couple of your personal community initiatives. You are on the boards of the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center. Dr. Gary Gilliland was here yesterday. And also, of course, of Starbucks. Kevin Johnson was here yesterday. Share with us what you're hoping to accomplish through those roles.
Oh, it's a real privilege to be associated with these iconic organizations in the community. With Starbucks, in fact, Kevin was at Microsoft. I worked for Kevin when he was at Microsoft, and I've known him, and I've gotten to know Howard. And I think he was here yesterday,
yes.
And I'm very, very excited about what Starbucks is doing. Whether it's, ultimately, it's about that experience that they're trying to create and using of digital technology, and to be on the board, to learn and to contribute. I think that's fantastic. And what Gary and team are doing at Fred Hutch is just truly inspiring to me, to have even that goal of solving cancer by the turn of the next decade. It's an audacious goal. It's one of these places where, again, I had not understood it, which is one of the big rate limiters to even progress in cancer, is how can you take the research that is happening and make it comprehensible in a way so the new hypotheses can be created by sort of the researchers at Fred Hutch and other places. So technology is going to play a huge role. For me, I'm learning so much, and Gary is an amazing leader in terms of the organization. He's got a great team. So it's fantastic to be associated with both of these organizations.
As you look to the future, I know that you're a big fan of poetry. Is there a line or a phrase of poetry that most capitalizes or summarizes your view of the future personally and of Microsoft and of the technology industry?
It's fascinating. You see, as we were getting ready to disclose at our Ignite conference a few weeks back some of our quantum efforts, so I had a chance to spend a lot of time with Michael Friedman, who's a Fields Medal winning mathematician who's part of our quantum effort. And he was schooling me on a lot of the quantum technology. And being a mathematician, so he asked me this question, he said, hey, do you know your square roots? I said, what? I think I did. I was not a great student, but I think I know square roots. And he says, do you know square roots of imaginary numbers? I didn't know where he was going, but it turns out that the square roots of imaginary numbers have a lot to do with quantum computers. But there was this line of poetry I'd read a couple of years ago by a Pulitzer Prize-winning poet called Vijay Seshadri. It's called Imaginary Numbers. And it goes something like this. It's the soul like the square root of -1 is an impossibility that has its uses. And I think it just captures, a lot, that force that's within us, that seeks out the unimaginable, that gets us up to solve the impossible. And so there is poetry behind square roots of imaginary numbers.
Well, Satya Nadella, Microsoft CEO, thank you very much for joining us at the GeekWire Summit.
Thank you so much.
Here's a look at some books being published this week.